The early morning mist hung low over the sprawling military base, casting a gray haze across the rows of steel barracks and asphalt roads, and in the quiet stillness, the tension was already palpable as Sergeant Riley had seen the subtle nervous energy ripple through the ranks ever since the new female officer, Lieutenant Harper, had arrived, a woman whose reputation whispered through the mess hall and training grounds, spoken in awe and thinly veiled skepticism, because no one could quite believe that someone so young and slight could endure the relentless brutality of the drill instructors. Yet she had arrived with a precise calm that unsettled even the most hardened veterans, and on that fateful Tuesday, when the sun had barely begun to creep over the horizon, Colonel Danvers, a man notorious for his iron-fisted methods and temper that could snap a man into submission in seconds, noticed what he deemed a lapse in discipline during morning exercises and, with a glare that could freeze a storm, singled her out, dragging her away from the formation with a mix of fury and theatrics, and before anyone could intervene, the colonel, with an almost surreal display of rage, shoved her into the narrow, cold bathroom of the barracks and forced her head into the toilet, the icy water shocking her senses, eliciting gasps from the few soldiers who had witnessed the act, and for a moment, silence reigned, a silence so thick that it seemed to press against every wall, every heart, as the other soldiers exchanged looks of disbelief, some frozen with fear, others burning with indignation, but no one dared to step forward, the authority of Colonel Danvers casting an oppressive shadow over their courage, and in that terrifying instant, something inside Lieutenant Harper shifted, a quiet, almost imperceptible calm settling over her like the still eye of a hurricane, and as the colonel leaned back with a triumphant smirk, certain of his dominance, she felt a surge of clarity, an unwavering focus that sharpened her mind and steeled her body, and when she pulled herself free, her movements were deliberate, controlled, almost hypnotic, as if the humiliation had ignited an inner force the colonel could never comprehend, and she stood, water dripping from her hair, staring him in the eyes with a calm so piercing it unsettled him more than any scream or defiance could have. And then, without a word, she executed a series of actions so precise and rapid that the room seemed to slow around them, flipping the power dynamic entirely, first disabling the colonel's immediate ability to act with a tactical maneuver learned in specialized training few on the base even knew she had undergone, and then moving through the barracks with a calculated speed that left even seasoned soldiers in stunned awe, locking doors, alerting communication channels with silent codes, and coordinating with a handful of allies she had subtly built trust with over the past weeks, all while maintaining the cold, unwavering gaze of someone who had already accepted the possibility of death yet refused to yield. And as the chaos unfolded, whispers of her reputation spread like wildfire across the base, soldiers peeking from behind corners, unable to reconcile the gentle demeanor they had first observed with the lethal precision now on display, and soon the colonel found himself isolated, trapped by the very environment he had assumed he controlled, his authority crumbling under the weight of a tactical genius disguised as a junior officer. And as alarms began to sound, Lieutenant Harper moved with the grace and efficiency of a seasoned operative, disarming threats, neutralizing resistance without unnecessary brutality, and ensuring the safety of her fellow soldiers who had watched in awe. As one by one they realized that the woman they had underestimated was not just competent, she was extraordinary, and when the final confrontation came, face to face with the colonel, he lunged with the arrogance of someone convinced of inevitable victory, only to be met with a controlled counter that pinned him decisively, her voice calm, authoritative, and unwavering as she declared the chain of command temporarily suspended until higher authorities arrived, and in that single act, she not only saved lives but shattered preconceived notions about what strength looked like, leaving every soldier, veteran and rookie alike, staring in disbelief and awe at the quiet, soaked figure of Lieutenant Harper, the very image of resilience and calculated courage. And as the base slowly returned to controlled chaos, Stories of that morning began to circulate through the ranks. Tales of the officer who had been humiliated, who had faced the unthinkable, yet emerged not only unbroken but as a force that redefined respect, authority, and the limits of human resolve. And as she walked through the corridors, dripping wet but unbowed, the murmurs of admiration and astonishment followed her, whispers that would grow into legend, cementing her place in the base's history as the woman who faced the ultimate degradation and transformed it into an unforgettable victory. And though the colonel would later attempt to reclaim his dignity and authority, the damage was done. The paradigm had shifted, and Lieutenant Harper's name became synonymous with the kind of courage that could not be taught, only embodied, a testament to the fact that true strength often emerges in the most unexpected moments, when the world believes you are defeated, and yet, through focus, intelligence, and unwavering resolve, you prove that the human spirit is far more formidable than anyone could anticipate. And as the day ended, and the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the base in long shadows, soldiers continued to talk in hushed tones about what had happened, about the officer who had turned humiliation into triumph, and somewhere deep inside each of them, a seed of inspiration had been planted, a lesson they would carry forward about courage, strategy, and the quiet, unshakable power of someone who refuses to yield, forever changing the narrative of what it meant to serve, to fight, and to face the impossible with unwavering determination. As the dust settled and the echo of alarms faded into the heavy hum of the base, a new kind of tension took hold, one laced not with fear but with astonishment, as soldiers began to process the enormity of what had just unfolded. Lieutenant Harper standing at the epicenter of a storm she had not only weathered but mastered, her drenched uniform clinging to her as if marking the battle she had fought silently. The colonel seated on the floor, disoriented and stripped of his assumed dominance, realizing with a mix of disbelief and grudging respect that the very officer he had sought to humiliate had become the arbiter of discipline, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to the chaos that swirled around them. And the commanding officers who arrived minutes later were met with a scene that seemed almost surreal. Soldiers whispering in corners, some shaking their heads in awe, others cautiously nodding in recognition of her skill, as Lieutenant Harper methodically debriefed the situation, her voice steady, authoritative, and measured, recounting every tactical decision she had made, every calculated move to protect the lives of those under her charge. And as the higher command listened, the narrative began to crystallize, transforming from an act of humiliation into a demonstration of exceptional leadership, resilience, and strategic genius. And the colonel, though initially defiant, found himself unable to contest the evidence, the video footage, the testimony of soldiers, and most importantly, the undeniable result that Lieutenant Harper had turned a moment of degradation into a triumph that saved lives and preserved the integrity of the base. And as the day wore on, her colleagues, once skeptical and wary, approached her with cautious respect, their earlier doubts dissolving in the face of her calm decisiveness and the clarity with which she had handled a situation that could have spiraled into disaster. And stories of her actions spread beyond the barracks, reaching the mess halls, the training grounds, and eventually even the higher echelons of military command, a narrative of courage, intelligence, and composure under pressure that defied expectation and challenged deeply ingrained assumptions about strength, authority, and the underestimated power of an individual who refuses to be broken. And yet, even amidst the recognition, Lieutenant Harper remained measured, focused not on accolades or fame, but on ensuring that the base returned to operational stability, checking on each soldier who had witnessed the incident, quietly encouraging those who trembled with lingering fear, and reinforcing the principles of teamwork, discipline, and vigilance that had always been the foundation of their service. And as she moved through the corridors, her presence no longer one of mere authority but of earned reverence, she understood the deeper lesson that had emerged from the ordeal. That true leadership is not asserted through fear or aggression, but through courage, intelligence, and the ability to act decisively when circumstances seem impossible, and in the following days, the dynamics of the base shifted subtly yet irrevocably, with soldiers finding renewed inspiration in her example, officers re-evaluating their methods, and even the colonel, forced to reckon with his own arrogance, adopting a grudging acknowledgement of her capabilities, the incident forever altering the hierarchy, the culture, and the collective consciousness of everyone who had been present. And in the quiet moments, when the sun dipped low and shadows stretched across the barracks, Lieutenant Harper would sometimes pause and reflect, not on the humiliation she had suffered, but on the transformation it had sparked within her. A fire of determination and clarity that no act of cruelty could extinguish, and as she prepared for the next mission, the next challenge, the base itself seemed to hum with a new energy, a mix of respect, awe, and a profound understanding that the ordinary could be transformed into the extraordinary when courage, intellect, and unwavering resolve converged, and the story of that day became legend, not because of the act of violence that had started it, but because of the brilliance, resilience, and humanity of a single officer who, when confronted with the unimaginable, rose above every expectation, reshaped the fate of a military base, and left an indelible mark on everyone who witnessed her rise, proving that even in the darkest moments, the human spirit can assert itself in ways that stun, inspire, and endure long after the echoes of fear have faded.